In April 1720, Daniel Defoe published his history of the life and adventures of Mr. Duncan Campbell, which included a pamphlet entitled A Remarkable Passage of an Apparition, related by the Reverend Dr. Ruddle, of Launceston, in Cornwall, in the year 1665. It has been assumed that this ghost story was a bit of invention on the part of Defoe, but the remarkable passage of an apparition was no product of Defoe's lively imagination. It was a genuine narrative written by the hand of John Ruddle himself and proceeds thusly. Once upon a time, the parsonage of St. Mary Magdalene, Launceston, becoming vacant by the ejection of the independent intrusive pastor, John Ruddle was appointed to it, and began his ministry on Christmas in 1663. Now it so fell out that he was invited on the 20th June, 1665, to preach a funeral sermon. After the conclusion of the service, Parson Ruddle was leaving the church, when an ancient gentleman addressed him, and, Ruddle says,
with an unusual importunity almost forced against my humour to see his house that night, nor could I have rescued myself from his kindness, had not Mr. Elliot interposed, and pleaded title to me for the whole of the day.
However, Ruddle promised to call on the old gentleman, whose name was Bligh, and whose house was Botterthon. On the following Monday John Ruddle went to Botterthon, where he partook of an early dinner, and a neighbouring parson had been invited to meet him.
After dinner this brother of the coat undertook to show me the gardens, when, as I was walking, he gave me the first discovery of what was mainly intended in all this treat and compliment. First he began to tell the infortunity of the family in general, and then gave an instance in the youngest son. He related what a hopeful, sprightly lad he lately was, and how melancholic and sottish he was now grown. Then did he with much passion lament that his ill humour should so incredibly subdue his reason, for, says he, the poor boy believes himself to be haunted with ghosts, and is confident that he meets with an evil spirit in a certain field about half a mile from this place as often as he goes that way to school.
Neither the parents nor the parson who made this communication believed that the boy saw anything. They shrewdly suspected that he was lazy, and made the apparition an excuse for not going to school. Ruddle, however, saw the boy, and was convinced of his sincerity.
He told me with all naked freedom, and a flood of tears, that his friends were unkind and unjust to him, neither to believe nor pity him, and that if any man would but go with him to the place, he might be convinced that the thing was real. This woman, which appears to me, lived a neighbour here to my father, and died about 8 years since, her name, Dorothy Dingley. She never speaks to me, but passeth by hastily, and always leaves the footpath to me, and she commonly meets me 2 or 3 times in the breadth of the field. The first time I took notice of her was about 1 year since, and when I first began to suspect it to be a ghost, I had courage enough not to be afraid, but kept it to myself a good while, and only wondered very much about it. I did often speak to it, but never had a word in answer. At length I began to be terrified at it, and prayed continually that God would either free me from it or let me know the meaning of it. Whereupon, being urged to it, I told my brother William of it, and he privately acquainted my father and mother, and they kept it to themselves for some time. The success of this discovery was only this. They did sometimes laugh at me, sometimes chide me, but still commanded me to keep to my school, and put such fopperies out of my head. I did accordingly go to school often, but always met the woman by the way. The next morning, the lad was in my chambers, and very brisk. I arose and went with him. The field he led me to I guessed to be 20 acres, in an open country, and about 3 furlongs from any house. We went into the field, and had not gone above 1/3 part before the spectre in the shape of a woman, with all the circumstances he had described her to me the day before, met us and passed by. I was a little surprised at it, and though I had taken up a firm resolution to speak to it, yet I had not the power, nor indeed durst I look back, yet I took care not to show any fear to my pupil and guide, and therefore telling him that I was satisfied in the truth of his complaint, we walked to the end of the field and returned, nor did the ghost meet us that time above once. At our return the gentlewoman watched to speak with me. I gave her a convenience, and told her that my opinion was that her son's complaint was not to be slighted, yet that my judgment in his case was not settled. I gave her caution that the thing might not take wind, lest the whole country should ring with what we had yet no assurance of. The next morning, I went to the haunted field by myself, and walked the breadth of the field without any encounter. I returned and took the other walk, and then the spectre appeared to me, much about the same place where I saw it before, when the young gentleman was with me. In my thoughts it moved swifter than the time before, and about 10 feet distant from me on my right hand, insomuch that I had not time to speak, as I had determined with myself beforehand. The evening of this day, I propounded to them our going all together to the place next morning, and after some asseveration that there was no danger in it, we all resolved upon it. Thence we all four walked leisurely into the quartils, and had passed above half the field before the ghost made appearance. It then came over the stile just before us, and moved with that swiftness that by the time we had gone 6 or 7 steps it passed by. This ocular evidence clearly convinced, but strangely frightened, the old gentleman and his wife, who knew this Dorothy Dingley in her lifetime, were at her burial, and now plainly saw her features in this present apparition. The next morning, being Thursday, I went out very early by myself, and walked for about an hour's space in meditation and prayer in the field next adjoining the quartils. Soon after 5 I stepped over the stile into the disturbed field, and had not gone above 30 or 40 paces before the ghost appeared at the farther stile. I spake to it with a loud voice, whereupon it approached, but slowly, and when I came near it moved not. I spake again, and it answered, in a voice neither very audible nor intelligible. I was not in the least terrified, and therefore persisted until it spake again and gave me satisfaction. But the work could not be finished at this time, wherefore the same evening, an hour after sunset, it met me again near the same place, and after a few words on each side it quickly vanished, and neither doth appear since, nor ever will more to any man's disturbance. These things are true, and I know them to be so, with as much certainty as eyes and ears can give me, and until I can be persuaded that my senses do deceive me about their proper object, and by that persuasion deprive myself of the strongest inducement to believe the Christian religion, I must and will assert that these things in this paper are true.
Parson Ruddle's original manuscript is not in existence. It was probably given to Defoe, but a copy is preserved made by the son of John Ruddle. After the signature John Ruddle at the end of the narrative and the date is the sentence, "This is a copy of Wait I found written by my father and signed John Ruddle. Taken by me, William Ruddle, Vicar of South Petherwin in 1695.